Okay, so I'm here today to talk about Parallels Desktop. And as I was talking with Lauren and Steve about tonight's presentation, they said, please, the sound is kind of loud. Too loud. So they said, please make sure you talk about the ability for a person who wants to move to Catalina to run old 32-bit apps on their Mac using Parallels Desktop. And so I'm going to do that tonight. Then I'm going to show you some of the highlights for the new release of Parallels Desktop, which came out in August. And then I'll do my best to answer your questions about such things. And then we'll go from there. So my plan is to talk about the apps first, then the highlights in Parallels Desktop 15, which came out in August, and then we'll open up for Q&A. How does that sound? Okay? All right. So, as many of you know, Catalina does not support 32-bit apps. So you have an old app, like for example, if you have Office 2011, that won't run on Catalina. Most people don't realize, because Parallels Desktop is normally used with Windows operating systems, and the vast majority of virtual machines used in Parallels Desktop are Windows, they don't realize you can also run Mac OSs in virtual machines. So if you really, really wanted to run High Sierra or El Capitan, you can do so in Parallels Desktop. And tonight I'll show you how to do that and how to install 32-bit apps in that OS and to run those on your Catalina machine. Now, Lauren said to me, gee, if you could actually really do it in your demonstration, that'd be great. The problem is that takes about 45 minutes to an hour to do that because of download times and installing OSs, and a lot of that's pretty boring. So I did the Julia Child thing. I did it all ahead of time so I can just pull it out of the oven and show you what the final result is like. So I'll show you how to get started. I'll show you what you need to get started. I made a handout for you so you can follow along with me. I made a video for you of the whole process, and I squeezed out the boring parts, and it's up on our website now, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. And I hope you can leave here tonight thinking, wow, if I needed to run a 32-bit app in Catalina, I would be all set now. And that's great. And then I'll try and show you some of the new stuff in Parallels Desktop 15, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Do you want us to hand out?
Hand out in a few minutes. Okay, so you're in the situation that you have 32-bit apps you want to run, and that you want to move to Catalina also. Here's what you need to pull that off. You need sort of two things. You need the OS installer for that operating system, whether it's High Sierra or El Capitan or Sierra or whatever. You need that installer. Those are available from iTunes, but they're hidden. I will send Lauren a link so he can show you where to get those. Apple's kind of sneaky. They only want you to use the latest OS. They don't want you to think about the past, but sometimes you have to. You need that. You need for most apps, you're going to need the installer for that app. There's not much I can do about that. Typically, more complex apps do lots of things in installation, and you just can't copy and paste them and move them into a virtual machine. You need the installer. And there's not much I can do about that. I'll show you how you get started. I'll install Office 2011, and we'll run it, and we'll see you can still run the past on a new machine. This is a relatively recent MacBook Pro, and I'm in fact running Catalina, the latest patch that came out last week sometime. Okay, here's how you get started. Most people, most Parallels Desktop users, have exactly one virtual machine. Those are what we call normal people. And there are people like me who have like 12. Those are what you call abnormal people. So if you have a whole bunch, there's this really wonderful window that lets you see them all. If you have Parallels Desktop now, I'm going to bet you have just one OS in that window. That's okay. installing OSs takes space on your hard drive. You don't want to do that any more than you have to. So you start in this window, and either you hit the plus sign right here, or you go to the File menu and say New. Either one of those is fine. They both do the same thing. They bring up this dialog. This dialog allows you to install a new virtual machine. There are lots of ways you can install virtual machines. We're going to choose the one in the middle. I've already got the installer. So click on this, go to the next page, and it says, I'll find it for you. Well, you could do that, but I'm just going to find it myself. I know exactly what I want. I've got it right here. I want to install High Sierra. Just drag that right to here. And that's all you have to do. Okay? Now, it's going to ask you a question in this next dialog saying, I need to take that installer and turn it into a bootable hard drive. I need to write some stuff to do that. It's a bunch of stuff. It takes a minute or so. My suggestion to you is put it on your desktop. Because if you have a 5 gig file that's hidden away in the bowels of your file system, you're going to forget about it. It's going to eat up space. That's really bad for you. So I always put that file on my desktop. Desktop. Great. Put it there. It's fine. And you see it appear right here. That's just a mechanical step that we need to do. And it's about done now, I think. Almost. There we go. Okay. You have to name that virtual machines. I'm going to call it macOS High Sierra Test, because I already have a High Sierra already. You can put it wherever you want. There are two locations that we have in Parallels Desktop, either in your Documents folder or in a shared folder. If you ever want to move that virtual machine around other machines, if you put it in the shared folder, it's way easier to move around. So I always put mine there. Now, I will tell you a secret we don't tell normally to people, but I'm going to give you a little hint. Installing an OS is a rather computationally intensive thing to do. If you can give it more memory, it'll go faster. We don't usually tell people this because they forget to go back and change it back to a normal amount of memory later, and they're always stuck with more memory being used than is necessary. But I think you're a really sharp group. We can do this, and you can remember to always set it back. So I'm going to say, I don't need anything else on my desktop, but I do want to customize settings. Okay? And it'll bring up the customized dialog. I go to hardware and I say, hey, I think 1.5 gigs is not enough. Let's give it 4. That'll make the installation go much faster. Later I'll come back and set it down to 1 for something later on. And then there are other things you can do if you wish to make the installation even faster. And then you just start. And it just takes a while to do that. It's like installing OS on a brand new machine you just got. It takes 20 minutes or so. There's nothing to download. It's all self-contained, but it does take some time. So I'm going to move now from doing that live to showing you a video where we can go really fast over the boring parts. And that video is available to you. It's on our website right now. It's on the Parallels blog. And if you scroll down and you see a picture of a really ugly guy, okay, that's him. Probably here. This is it. You go to this blog post, and you'll see a video about what I'm going to show you, and also the directions how to do things. So it's all documented and ready for you. And I have a handout for you that gives you the highlights of the steps you're going to go through when you install a macOS virtual machine and you want to have 32-bit apps in it. Okay, so I'm now switching from real-time video to advanced time very fast. I'm going to quit this and say I don't need to install anything. Yeah, forget it. I'm fine. I'm going to turn off the audio and the video because I'm just going to talk over it. So these are the steps we've already done. Made the new virtual machine, and it takes a while to install it, and it runs for a while, and you have some other settings, and there's the OS installation, and then now it's as if you open up a box of your new Mac and you turned it on, and this is what you see. It's exactly like that. You now have a Mac inside your Mac. You have a Catalina Mac on your hardware, and now you're going to have a High Sierra or El Capitan Mac inside that Mac. You go through that process as you would expect. Install the OS. OS installation will proceed, takes a while. And then soon you'll get to this dialog, and there you are. I've got OS installed. It wants me to set some parameters. Where am I? My time zone. My keyboard. You're not transferring any information. It's a new machine. Set your Apple ID, create an account, all that kind of good stuff. And then soon, you'll see the desktop. There's one more step you have to take. You have to install something we call the Parallels tools. And this allows you to do things like drag and drop between your machines, things like this. It's really, really very useful. It makes it also run faster, so it's a good thing to do. And there's the tools being installed. You have to reboot after that. And now, you have a fully functional High Sierra Mac inside your Mac. So it's ready for you to take your old 32-bit app installer and drag it over and install it. So I'm going to do that now. I happen to have the installer for Mac Office 2011 handy. So I dragged that over, installed it, did the normal installation experience you'd expect. Yes, it got activated, everything's fine. And then I can launch Word 2011 with the features that are now missing from Word 2016. So there's Publishing Layout View, which I think was a really great invention in Word. They removed it after I left. That was a mistake on their part, and you can now correct it for your home machines. I know that went by pretty fast. It was understandable. It's relatively easy to do. Like I said, depending on how fast your machine is, how fast your internet connection is, it might take an hour. But it's probably an hour well spent if you've got 2 or 3 32-bit apps you want to use and not buy the new alternatives. Maybe there is no alternative for that application. Questions? Yes, in the back.
What is the oldest Mac OS that you support?
Good question. So Apple didn't allow virtualization of the Mac OS pre-Snow Leopard. And they asked us, please don't let people do that in your program either. So the Apple legal doesn't allow it, so we enforce that. So you can do Snow Leopard server and forward. Can you go back and go do Jaguar? No, but probably you don't want to. Okay? Did that answer your question? Snow Leopard server and forward are all fine. Sorry. The question was, what Mac OS, how far back do you go back in time? What Mac OSs can you put in a virtual machine? Snow Leopard server and forward. I'll try and repeat the question in the future. Yes?
Okay, my machine's still on Mojave. I have no intention of moving up to Catalina until I know that Parallels and I want to use El Capitan will work properly. Are there any significant differences in terms of the process if you're still on Mojave compared to Catalina?
Very good question. The question is, if my host OS is Mojave, or even earlier, and I want to do this same thing, this 32-bit virtual machine, can I do so? Is there anything different with the installation you just showed me? And the answer is no. You can do it on Mojave, you can do it on High Sierra, you can do it on Catalina. It will be almost exactly the same. The one thing that might be a little different, because Catalina has more dialogues asking you for permission, you might see a couple of those, but that's all. Okay? Answer question answered?
Yes.
Question.
If I create my virtual machine in Mojave, can I just take the virtual machine file and copy it over to a Mac with Catalina on it?
Okay, so the question is about moving virtual machines. Could I make a Mac virtual machine, say for High Sierra or Sierra, and move it over to some other machine? Or, you didn't ask this, but I'm going to put words in your mouth. Could I upgrade my machine that was Mojave to Catalina and everything still work? And the answer is yes, you can. There's no problem at all. If you want to move virtual machines around, you should follow what I showed you about putting it in the shared folder. That will set all the writing preferences and so on correctly so it can move around. I move things around all the time. If you want to just upgrade in place, if you're already on Parallels Desktop 15, then there's no problem at all. Parallels Desktop 15 supports Catalina and Mojave and High Sierra and so on. So that should be no problem for it at all.
I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying that you can keep the old one and run Catalina and then on virtual?
No, so this is a complication because we're not used to having vocabulary for running 2 OSs at once or 3 OSs at once. So I'm going to be very, very precise now, and I'm going to use the new terminology. Host OS, that's the OS on the hardware. Guest OS, that's the OS in a virtual machine. I have lots of guest OSs in my machine. I have Windows 10, I have Windows 8, I have Windows XP, so on. Those are all guest OSs. If my host OS is Mojave, can I do what you just showed me to install a Mac OS virtual machine and put my 32-bit apps in there? And the answer is yes. If I want to now move that host OS to Catalina, is that going to work? And the answer is yes. If you have the latest version of Parallels Desktop, that's not a problem at all. If I want to take that virtual machine and move it from my Mac Mini to my iMac or my new Mac Pro, can you do that? And the answer is yes, you can, if you follow the suggestion I made about putting it in the shared folder. And then that will move easily. Is that clearer now?
I'm still not sure if I can be running Mojave and then put Catalina as a, if I didn't want to.
So you want to invert it. So I want to stay in the past but run the future in a virtual machine. I was showing the opposite. You can certainly do that. Catalina is fully supported as both a guest OS and a host OS in Parallels Desktop 15. Would you want to do that?
Yes.
I do it, but I'm weird. There's no reason why not to do it that I can think of off the top of my head. So yes, you could run the future OS, Catalina, in a virtual machine and still leave your main machine in Mojave and your main machine still running your 32-bit apps. Yes, you could do that.
I mean, it eliminates the problem of all the installation once to install some of the things.
Yeah, but you also don't get all the extra newness and the goodness of Catalina in your main machine. As an example, you may have heard that Catalina puts up a lot more dialogue saying, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to do this? And they're a little bit annoying. I was surfing the web the other day, going to a website I've often gone to in the past, and a Catalina put up a dialogue. Do you want to allow downloads from this site? And I go, shit, I didn't know it did downloads. I never asked for a download. No. So Catalina helped me there. It was good. So that's the one thing you won't have if you do it the way you suggested. Okay? Question in the back.
So does each virtual machine need its own copy of Parallels tools?
So the question is, do I have to put Parallels tools in each virtual machine? And the answer is absolutely. Parallels tools gives you the ability to copy and paste, do networking stuff. You definitely want them. The VM runs faster. If you don't, you'll get alerts saying, don't you want to install those tools? Don't you want to install those tools all the time? And you'll lose your mind. It's installed in the virtual machine in the guest OS. So yes, if you have 9, you'll have 9 installations of Parallels tools.
Can you install on an external drive?
Excuse me?
Can you install guests on an
Good question. So, can you put a guest OS on a virtual machine and run it from Parallels? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. I do it all the time. This is a really great little 1 terabyte drive, SSD, really, really fast. Love it. It's great. You'll notice here, Oh, I'm in a movie. Okay. Let me go back to the real world. Okay. You'll notice here, I have a couple virtual machines where they look kind of funny. They have question marks here, and they have no dialogue, no little buttons. That's because they're on this external drive, and it's not plugged in. So it's saying you can't run those right now. So yes, you can do that. I think it's great. If you have an SSD, the faster the better. It'll almost be unnoticeable to you that they're running on a spare drive.
I just bought one of those.
There you go. Answer your question? Other questions? Yes.
What about programs like iPhoto, that come with the operating system, an older operating system?
So the question is, what about programs that are bundled with the Mac OS? So if you install Sierra, you're going to get an older copy of iTunes, and you're going to get an older copy of iPhoto and so on. Can you put a newer version of iTunes or a newer version of iPhoto in that old OS? I don't know the answer. That's an Apple question. I don't know.
You can if Apple will allow you, but
Yeah.
some apps like Pages and Keynote are no longer available to download from the App Store if you're on operating systems before, like, I think Mojave.
Yeah, and Apple tends to forget the past as soon as they can, right? So, well, if that OS installation included iTunes, for example, you'll have the older version of iTunes in there. Is that version compatible with the newer version on Catalina? I don't know, probably so. Does that answer your question?
What I want to do is, right now I'm running Mojave, and I'm using iPhoto because it does the geotagging. And I want to be able to make a virtual machine with Mojave with my copy of iPhoto. And then between that and my copy of Photoshop Elements, which is also 32-bit, and then I can move forward to Catalina.
I'm going to paraphrase what you just said. I'm using Mojave. There's a version of iPhoto from Mojave that I like. I have some other third-party apps that are 32-bit that I like. If I install all those in a virtual machine with Mojave, and it's all working the way I want, can I move my machine forward to Catalina? And the answer is yes, you can. Should be fine.
Getting the copy of iPhoto.
You'll need the iPhoto installer, just like I needed the installer for, is iPhoto built into macOS?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, yeah. So you'll need the iPhoto installer, and you run it like I just ran the Mac Office installer in the virtual machine. It'll be there, and then everything's fine. Be careful in that virtual machine running your old OS. Be careful if you do updates. Security updates, sure. Oh, do you want to upgrade to Catalina? Probably you don't want to press that button, because undoing that button press would be really, really hard. So be careful when you do updates. So the answer is you should be able to do what you want.
Is it possible to create a virtual machine, just rather than doing an install, just load a whole image of your old drive?
It's a very reasonable question. Joshin asked me that question earlier today. The question was, can I just take my old machine, it's Mojave or El Capitan or whatever, and just suck it all into a virtual machine and have it all there and working perfectly the way I like it? And the answer is, yes, we support that for Windows. So we have a thing I call it the disk sucker. The marketing guys call it something better. That you just point it at a hardware PC and it moves all of Windows and all the apps, all your data into a virtual machine. We don't have that today for macOS.
But don't you have a virtual disk in your virtual machine? Why can't you just put whatever you want on it?
It's not quite that easy. So I alerted the engineers. I said to them, we're getting so many questions about running older Mac OSs because of the 32-bit issue. I think we're going to see an uptick in the number of Mac OS virtual machines in the future. If that's true, we should support the migration from a hardware Apple iMac into a virtual machine the same way you do for Windows. And they said, fine, if we see that uptick, we'll consider doing that engineering work. So we don't know yet. Right now, the number of virtual machines that are macOS virtual machines and Parallels Desktop are less than 1%, because Windows just swamps everything. If it went up to 2% or 3%, I think I'd be able to encourage the developers to do that. So today I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did. We have the answer for Windows. We don't for macOS. Stay tuned. Okay?
You talked about increasing the capacity when you install it, but do you have recommendations in terms of how much overall, space or to include?
Sure. So the question is about resources for the virtual machine. Disk space, RAM, things like this. And do we have recommendations? The answer is absolutely. When you go to make a virtual machine, you get a dialog that looks like this. Here we are. This is for RAM. If you stay in the green area, you're going to be okay. If you stay in the yellow area, you're asking for trouble. And if you move into red, you are definitely going to fail big time. The colors here depend on the hardware you're on. If you're on a Mac with a whole bunch of RAM, the numbers will be different. Good suggestions. The number one cause of somebody calling our office and saying, hey, Windows is really slow now. Help me. Did you recently increase the RAM? Oh yeah, I wanted it to run really fast. Well, they increased it so much, the Mac had no RAM. If the Mac is starved for RAM, everything will be slow. Mac apps, Windows apps, everything goes down. Move it back into the green area, reboot, call us back if you still have a problem. They don't call back. So that's for RAM. For hard drive, the virtual hard drive grows and shrinks as is needed. You'll get a warning if you run out of real hard drive space on your Mac, but that's pretty rare. So, let's see.
You can only change the settings while the computer shuts down.
That's correct. So, just like you can't rip open a Mac while it's running and insert Sims into it. That would be a bad thing to do. So here I have a hard drive to be 64 gigabytes maximum. It will be however much it needs to be, and will grow to 64 megs if it needs to. It'll shrink if you remove apps, remove data, and so on. But if you run out of space, it'll tell you, and you can increase some. And that's a really easy thing to do. So RAM is set when the virtual machine launches. The hard drive space grows or shrinks as you're using it, installing apps, creating movies, things like this. Those are about the only two resources that really matter a whole lot. The network is shared, the keyboard is shared, the mouse is shared. RAM and hard drive space are used up. When you launch a virtual machine, it takes a hunk of RAM from your Mac and locks it down. It's only available to that virtual machine. So you can run as many virtual machines on your Mac as you have space in memory. You can install as many of you as space on your hard drive. Did I answer your question, or did I give you too much data? Made sense? Okay, great. Anybody else? One more. Yeah, here.
So two questions. So is there, I understood both of what you just said. Is there like a amount of space that installing the Parallels takes? Hard drive space. So how much space does it take to install Parallels? So there are two things that you have to consider: the application itself and the virtual machine. The application is insignificant. It's a couple, 100 megs or so. The hard drive space, a typical Windows installation, Windows 10 with Office, is about 20 gigabytes. That's about what it is.
My virtual machines are often bigger because I put lots of crazy stuff in them. Sometimes they're smaller, but that's a reasonable number for you, 20 gigs. A Mac OS is usually smaller than that, so maybe 10.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay?
And the other.
Oh, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm wondering, when we were talking about doing the reverse and putting Catalina
In the VM?
in, yeah, if maybe I could do that to just find out what works and what doesn't work on Catalina.
Sure, you could definitely do that. However, step 0 on that handout was a little application you can run that Steve told me about that will tell you what apps won't run in Catalina.
Oh, wonderful.
Get that, and you'll have a full report. You can print it out and you keep a track. I didn't realize a couple of apps I liked didn't run in 64-bit. Damn, I'm going to do this myself. So I learned something from doing that.
Okay.
So that's a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Question answered?
Yes.
Yes.
You talked about different things being shared by the operating
Yes.
system. How about, I have, for example, a scanner that will only run on 32. I have some printers that will only run on 64. What happens with those types of situations?
That's a good question. The question is, what about hardware restrictions? I have a scanner that only runs in 32-bit. I have a printer that only runs in 64-bit. How do I deal with those when I'm moving forward to Catalina and stuff? That's a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I'm going to guess. Printer will be no problem. Scanner will be a problem. What you'll want to do is directly connect that scanner to the virtual machine. And then I've done that with some USB devices. When you plug in a USB device, I don't have one handy, but when you do, a dialog will come up and say, do you want this to be connected to your Mac, to Windows 10, to Windows 8, to Leopard, whatever you got running, and you make a choice. So when you make that choice, I pick the 32-bit one for that scanner. The killer is, the scanner itself is not 32 or 64-bit restricted. It's this driver for the scanner. So you won't be able to install a 32-bit scanner driver in Catalina. You'll only be able to install it in the virtual machine. Unless that scanner manufacturer is going out of business, I would expect they would have a 64-bit driver already. No? All right. All right. So I made a guess there. I was wrong. That's what I would do. I have successfully used hardware peripherals that only work with Windows by doing that same approach. I only connect them to the virtual machine. Okay? Question answered, we think? Yeah. Yes.
If I happen to have Windows on a separate hard drive, like for boot camp, do I have to reinstall Windows again under Parallel, or could Parallel use that same copy of Windows that's on that external hard drive?
You could be a shill. That's a great question. You can't see it in my dialog here because Parallels, when I launched it, noticed I didn't have Boot Camp installed. If you have Boot Camp installed, you'll see a fourth big option in that window. Import, do this, do this. Shall I use your Boot Camp partition? So yes, we can use it, no problem at all. So it'll be a big option in this dialog right here. There'll be another big icon up here, Boot Camp. Shall I use my Boot Camp partition and use that as a virtual machine? The answer is yes. There are a few restrictions, but they're not ones you're going to be encumbered by, I don't think. Okay?
Why does the window, the middle thing there say, or another OS from a DVD or image file, when you told them we can't do that? It specifically says image file. I'm not trying to suck it from the machine, I want to take an image file.
Image file, they mean an installer file. That's what they mean.
They should say that. Then.
Okay? I'll put that forward to the engineers to change that wording. Okay? It does not mean image file in that sense. I heard what you're saying.
I think, Andrew, I think you had a particular interest in Linux, and one nice thing you can see is just how easy it makes to download Linux as well to try it out.
There are a bunch of free OSs you can dip down here. Various Linux distributions and so on. If you're a developer, Microsoft will let you get a copy of Windows 7 easily, things like this. And like there are many cases, there are several ways to do a particular task. I showed you what I thought was the easiest way. There are other ways too, but they're harder, so I skipped them.
He mentioned Linux. I use a Linux Mint on Parallels, and it works great.
Good, glad to hear it. Last question? Yes?
How about backing up?
So very good question. So the question is backing up. So on my system, my virtual machines are all here in shared folders, and they're pretty good size. Somewhere between 162 gigabytes down to 7 gigabytes. The easiest way to do backups is to shut down your virtual machines and back up those Gymongo files. That's the easiest way. The killer is any application that has giant files that change all the time is not compatible with Time Machine. So you have a 100 gigabyte file. It changes 3 bytes in it. Time Machine will back up the whole thing. The next day when Time Machine starts up, that 100 gigabyte file is there and 3 more bytes have changed. It'll back up the whole thing. So your backup drive is going to fill up almost instantaneously. So we don't recommend doing that. You can get a backup utility from a company named Acronis that we worked with, so it will do things, it will only back up the changes in your virtual machines. I haven't used it yet. I'm told it works. I can't tell you from personal experience it's great. I back up things manually. I hope that's a lame answer, but it's the correct one. You can't run a continuous backup machine if you're running virtual machines all the time. You'll fill up your store.
How about Super Duper or Carbon Copy Cloner?
Those are wonderful utilities. They won't look inside that giant file and only back up the changed bits. They will back up the whole changed file, and that's the problem, just like Time Machine.
They shouldn't, because Carbon Copy Cloner is based on rsync, which in fact does go through a file and look at only the changes in the file and only backs up the differences. So unless they've changed, it should do that. I can't guarantee it will.
I can't guarantee it at all. I've never heard that. I will try it, and I will let you guys know. But until we verify it, and I double check with the engineers that it's going to work fine, I'm saying back up the whole file. Yeah.
No, I agree with you.
Okay? Shall we move on to Parallels Desktop 15? Okay. Please.
So Parallels Desktop 15, why wouldn't you just go to that one? So you're talking, what's the number for the one we've been talking about?
Almost everything I've said would apply to any version of Parallels in the last few years.
Okay.
So,
How many years, I'm sorry?
last few years. I'm trying to think, did I say anything that would be wrong? Oh, you could go back 8 or 9 years. Everything I've said is been generic in Parallels for a long, long time. We come out with a new version of Parallels Desktop every August. And the reason we do that is the world around us is always changing. We exist between 2 giant companies, Microsoft and Apple. If either one of them does anything big, we got to change. And it turns out coming out in August is the best for our users. Apple usually announces their operating system changes in June. They ship them in October. We got time to fix things and so on. Microsoft is more open. They tell us everything that's going on, and so we're able to fit in that schedule. As an example, when Apple announced Retina, it completely destroyed everything we had. We had to build up our graphics up from ground zero again. We did, and you never saw the ripple. but it was a lot of late nights in Moscow. Okay? So that's why we come out with this new version every year, because the world's changing around us. The big news for Parallels Desktop 15, which came out in August, was we've moved completely to Apple Metal. Metal is the graphics library inside modern Macs, iPads, iPhones, tvOS, watchOS. It's hardware accelerated by Apple, and so we're getting the benefit of that. The end result is applications that use a lot of graphics are much faster, and that would be like CAD/CAM, architectural applications, games. But even some things you don't think of as primarily graphical, like Microsoft Word, launches 80% faster in 15, because it must do a lot of graphic stuff and initialization. So that's the big news. I'll show you some other news too, but I'm going to show you what I mean by Metal and why it has a big effect. So I could show you this in a CAD/CAM application, but I can't demo those very well, and I can't make them understandable to anybody, so I hardly ever demo them. It's much easier to demo a game. So, just one question. I should have asked this earlier. Who here has never seen even a demo of Parallels Desktop before? Wow. Okay. So let me back up and just remind you really quickly what it does. Parallels Desktop enables you to run Windows applications on your Mac simultaneously with running any Mac applications. It's as easy as this. I can take a document, move from my desktop to my virtual machine like this, and launch that application. It happens to be a Word document. I'm now running Word for Windows. I have Office installed in my virtual machine. I can take advantage of features that are in Office for Windows that aren't in Office for Mac. I can know that when I send this document to a client who uses Windows, not the Mac I use, it'll look the same, so on. And that is the basic value proposition of Parallels Desktop, and it's been that way for over a decade. Okay, now, I wish I could tell you that every single Windows application that's ever been written and ever will be written will work just fine in Parallels. I can't tell you that. I can tell you the vast majority do, but there are some that don't. Here's an example, one that doesn't. Microsoft came out with an application. It's a game. It defines the genre of real-time strategy games. It's called Age of Empires. Came out with a new version last March. I tried to launch it in Parallels Desktop 14, and I got these dialogues. It said, no, no, no. This is Microsoft English. This is normal English. So I rewrote them for you. I'm sorry. The graphics card that you have in your Parallels Desktop virtual machine is just not good enough. I'm sorry. The implementation of DirectX you have is just not good enough. It's going to be horrible. And the warnings were correct. It was horrible. It was slow, it was laggy, yada, yada, yada. So very bad. Let me show you that same application running in Parallels Desktop 15. So first of all, no dialogues, no warnings. That's great. In case you aren't familiar with this game, this is a civilization building game. You start out in the Stone Age. You have a bunch of villagers. They can chop wood, they can fish, they can gather fruit, and you develop civilizations. You build an army, you build a navy, you take over the world. It's really fun. So I like it a lot, and I've played this game on plenty of Windows PCs. It runs at exactly the same speed. It's just great. And this is the experience we've had with lots of games with lots of architectural applications. They didn't run before in Parallels Desktop 14 because our graphics was too slow. And now that we're on top of metal and we're hardware accelerated into later Macs and so on, it runs just great. So that's my basic demo of why it's good.
With the same hardware graphics card?
I'm sorry, the question is the same hardware graphics card?
Yeah, without changing the graphics card?
I didn't change the Mac at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't change the Mac at all. So I'm gonna expand that question and say, does this mean that any graphics application, any game I find that runs on Windows will run this great on a Mac in Parallels Desktop 15? And the answer is, it depends on your Mac, on your hardware. You've got a 4-year-old MacBook Air with 2 gigs of RAM, and you want me to make that function like a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art gaming rig that costs $20,000, that has a liquid-cooled graphics card? That would take witchcraft, and I don't have that. So I can run at the speed of your hardware. I can give you better performance you had before. Will it be enough for you? I can't tell. So that's why we have a 2-week trial of Parallels Desktop. Anybody can download and try it. And you can download and get a copy of Windows at no charge. I'll talk about that in a minute. And try it out. If it works for you, great. Buy Parallels Desktop, buy your copy of Windows, have a wonderful life. If it doesn't, you've wasted a little bit of time, but I can't, no one else can help you with that, okay? So, big performance boost in graphics. Big performance boost for games, architectural applications, drawing applications, but even in some places you wouldn't think there'd be a big boost, there is. Okay? That's the number one lesson for Parallels Desktop 15. Next lesson. Fully support Catalina. Of the Catalina features that I have shown people, the one that gets the most applause is our support for Sidecar. So, if you aren't familiar, Sidecar is a feature that allows you, oops, sorry about that. Sidecar is a feature that allows you to use an iPad that you happen to have laying around as a secondary screen on your Mac. I've had a feature like this now for about, a year and a half. I can't tell you how great it is. It doesn't sound like it would be that fantastic, but it really is. Having that additional secondary screen, I can move status windows there, I can move little dialogues there, I have my main big screen for the task I'm working on right now, I can be downloading things, I can be doing other things, watching my mail, and have my big screen devoted to that, my main task. When I'm not at home and don't have that set up, I miss it. So having that secondary screen is really amazing. Apple did a great job of doing this, and I want to show it to you. So I brought my iPad. Now, I can't hook 2 machines to the projector. So I'm going to hook my iPad to the projector, and I'm going to unhook it from the Mac for a few moments. So the screen's going to go black. If I can get this out. Wrong thing. Okay. Sometimes it takes 2 hands. Okay. So here we are. In a moment, you should see, there we go, that's my iPad screen. I'm going to go back to the Mac now and select in the Sidecar dialog that little menu that says, oh, wait a minute.
We'll cut this part out.
Yeah, why is that happening? That shouldn't be the case. I'm very puzzled. Ah, there we go. And you will see my screen change to a Mac screen. And I can move that window from there, like that, over here. That's great. That's just Sidecar. If you haven't seen Sidecar, it's a really nice feature. But we added things to it for Parallels Desktop. If I go up in here, and I'll show you this in a few moments, I can move windows to my iPad. Now my main Mac screen is empty. I'm running Windows over here. I'm doing whatever I want. I can use the Apple Pencil, and that's really cool. It turns out Windows 10, has a kind of touch mode. I'm going to turn that on now. And now I can do things like this. Come on, guys, don't make a liar out of me. No, that shouldn't happen. There we go. And now I can use my Apple Pencil as if it were a stylus on a Surface Pro and get pressure sensitivity. And you can see what a wonderful artist I am. I use this all the time. It's kind of nice. You have the ability now to use your Apple Pencil as if it were a stylus on a Surface Pro. And all the functionality there. This is a free program I got from the Microsoft Store. If you happen to go to an application like Word, there we go. At the bottom of the screen, this is my MacBook Pro touch bar. Apple Parallels Desktop supports the touch bar for Windows applications. And we gave these buttons to Windows for Office, Word for Windows. So that you can get the touch bar support even in an application on the iPad, you aren't using a Surface Pro, and so on. The advantage of this is you have all the touch bar buttons that you would want to use on your MacBook Pro, but you can now do on the iPad and use your Apple Pencil. If I go up here to the full screen button, this is the menu we added. It said before, move Windows to the iPad. Now it says move Windows back to the Mac. And this support, including support for the new functionality in the Apple Pencil 2, like double tap, things like this, are all supported and we do Sidecar on a Windows VM in Parallels Desktop 15. This is part of the support we put in for Catalina. And if I go back now here and turn off Sidecar, this will go back to being an iPad, normal iPad for me. If you haven't used a second screen on your Mac, you really can't appreciate how great this is. It's an incredibly useful feature to have that available on your Mac. Okay, question?
So I have a separate extra monitor
Mm-hmm.
that I can plug in periodically, and I can just move things from my Mac onto that other monitor. Can I move Parallels over there and be running Parallels on that monitor while I'm running my regular Mac stuff on my computer?
The answer is, can I move a Parallels desktop window running Windows from my main monitor to a secondary monitor? Absolutely, fully supported, have been for years.
And then you just click on whichever one you want to be working on?
Yep, just Parallels Desktop fully supports MultiMonitor Max. So you could have your main screen be Mac, secondary screen be Windows 10, a tertiary screen be Windows 7, and just be completely connected. No problem at all.
Or do Catalina and an old OS?
Could have moved Mac OS VMs to a separate monitor? And the answer is absolutely yes, you could. It's just a window. We don't really care what's running inside it, just another operating system. Okay? Okay. So, last thing I wanted to show you about Parallels Desktop 15. So, Microsoft also tries to move the bar and show you really neat stuff for Windows. And they came out with an application last June, so just like 5-6 months ago. And I thought, what a great idea. The application is available for free from the Microsoft Store. It allows you to run an Xbox game on your Windows 10 PC. So I called up my graphics team and I said, guys, make that work in Parallels Desktop 15. Graphics are so much faster, it should be just fine. And they said, sure, we'll be happy to do that. And here it is. It's called Xbox. What a wonderful name. And I downloaded a game. Game happens to be called the Turing Test. And like all games, there's a little startup sequence you'll see in a minute. Here I am running an Xbox game on my Mac of an application that Microsoft never intended for Macs to use.
Morning, Ava. Your wake-up has been sanctioned by the ISA. We lost contact with the ground crew 450 hours ago. We have tried to establish further communications, but we are not getting any responses.
In just a moment, I'll get control.
Okay, doesn't it make sense to do visual checks first?
We have already looked at the data. The ISA has made the executive decision that you report to the surface post-haste. You are our emergency response.
Okay, so now I have control. I can walk around. I can look around. I can do things. I'm going to run down this hallway. I'm going to run down this long hallway. Go up these stairs.
Pick up your EMT.
You got to have an EMT, whatever the hell that is.
Okay.
Got my gun.
We are going to take a lander to Europa.
I'm ready to go. Now, rather than play this game for the next 2 hours, the point here is Xbox games are widely available. Now you can run them on your Mac with Parallels Desktop, free of charge from Microsoft. I give great credit to the graphics team at Parallels. They made that work, and I originally thought they wouldn't be able to do it, and I was wrong. Okay, those are the things I plan to show you. There are still other features I haven't shown you, but you run out of time and so on. So I'm happy to try and answer any more questions about Parallels and Parallels Desktop or other Parallels products, and we could probably bring the light up a little bit. Okay, I see a question right there.
This is part comment and part question.
Please.
I said before I run Linux under Parallels.
Yep.
It works great in general. But one problem I had was every time I would click on Parallels to open it up, it would take me automatically to Linux. And I couldn't find out how to get to the Parallels shell or whatever, the overstructure, until finally today, I found some notation going clear up to the icon at the top and right-clicking on the icon, but you couldn't click on the actual application to get there. So
This window here? I'm clicking on the Parallels bars.
Yeah, clear up at the top.
Yep.
Right click. But, I mean, it seemed like I should have been able to get to that by clicking on, the application name or that type of thing. So I wondered if that was specific to Linux or if that was, if that's a general thing, because it's certainly not very intuitive.
So, first of all, I'm sorry you were confused. The idea of running multiple operating systems simultaneously, for most people, is extremely weird. And so, Parallels itself is not an application most people would care about. Parallels by itself doesn't run anything. You have no operating system, what are you going to do? You're just going to open up. It's like having iMovie but no movies, right? So we tried to optimize the application to present the default OS the person was last using. That's the default. I don't set it that way. I set it to let me pick my OS because I often do really crazy things. Yours looks like it has the default. You used Linux last time and said, we're going to take you back to Linux. If that's not what you need or what you prefer, we can change that preference. I can show you how to do that. So we tried to do what we thought was the best for the majority of users, and that was to take them back to the OS they were using before, thinking that's probably what they wanted to do now.
Well, what I wanted to do was to get back to Parallels in order to try installing another operating system. And I must have tried it 25 times, and it was extremely frustrating.
I completely understand. The fact you're running 2 operating systems or installing 2 in Parallels puts you right away in the top 2% of users. So you're our edge case. We can't deal with this group and with you at the same time easily. I hope that's helped. I hope my demo has helped you a little bit. It's certainly very easy to do. I do a dozen or so OSs routinely. Okay? Yes?
So, I've had Macs forever, but there's a few programs that we kind of like that are Windows only.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess my question is, being leery of the Windows apps, if the Windows app freezes up or crashes or whatever, what does that do to Parallels and what does that do to my Mac?
So the question is, what if I had something go wrong inside Windows? What happens to Parallels? If my app crashes or Windows freezes, what happens? So, unlike some other solutions, Parallels Desktop runs a full copy of Windows. And that comes with all the goodness and all the badness that Windows has. So, can it freeze? Yes. Can you catch a virus? Yes. It's susceptible to any Windows virus out there, almost any, and you have to take measures for that. That's part of being in the Windows ecosystem. Can it freeze? Yes. You have some controls that a PC wouldn't have. So while I'm running an OS, I do have a menu here that lets me do sort of super things, like damn it, quit. Stop it, restart this OS, like that sort of thing. You don't have that easily in a Windows PC, but you do have some controls you can't do otherwise. You can also, I'm going to tell you about an advanced feature. If you like it, great. If it's like, whoa, too confusing, I don't want to even think about that, then please forget what I'm going to say. There's a really great feature in Parallels Desktop, which is called undo drives. You turn that on, do anything you want inside Windows. Go to any really dodgy website, install any sort of crappy app, anything beta. Oh, wow, my system has gotten really unstable. Undo. Everything I've done since I started Windows gets undone. And that means files I've added, files I've downloaded, files I've deleted, they come back. It's a giant undo switch. To me, that's enormously powerful. And I've used it, I've showed people how to use it. I once gave a demo to a reporter who was the technology correspondent at the San Francisco Chronicle. And he said, oh my God, that would save me a month's worth of work every year, because I'm installing beta versions of apps all the time. If I could install that beta version of the app, play with it for a week, and then do undo, and it was all gone, that's so great. So you have some goodness, but you have the weakness of Windows. I hope that answers your question, that yes, you have the goodness and the badness of Windows. You have flaws. An app that's going to freeze a PC will freeze Parallels Desktop too.
So then, what is that? I mean, how do I get out of it?
That's what I meant by this menu here. You don't have these sort of controls. You have a sort of Uber level that you don't have in a hardware PC. So you have this sort of control to reset, to restart, things like this. If you knew that app was kind of sketchy, like it was a beta app, you could have turned on undo drives and go, this is just so crazy, I'm not going to even deal with this anymore, undo. And we'll undo things for the last 2 weeks if you wanted. That's pretty cool. So you get some power, you have some weaknesses. I'm sorry, I can't solve.
But if I've got a database within that app.
That's a data file. If you have not turned on undo drives, you've got that data file, and that app crashed in a way that corrupted that data file, it's corrupted. It'd be corrupted on a hardware PC, it's corrupted in Parallels Desktop, and there's no way around that. Sorry.
So the undo, does that work with the different Mac OS?
Undo drives are a hardware level thing, yeah. They're seriously cool. Other questions?
What does it cost? What does
Parallel, what's the cost? I don't want to screw this up. Parallels Desktop comes in 3 editions: Standard, Professional, and Business. Standard, $80. Professional, Business, $99 a year. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
What about, I've never bought Windows.
I'll tell you a cool feature. You install Parallels Desktop on your Mac. It's the first time it's been installed. When you start it up, the first time it'll go, wow, I notice you don't have Windows. Shall I download and install it for you? And you go, yeah. Come back in 30 minutes, and it's installed. Your username is the user, your Mac password is the password, and you're ready to go. It's like a Windows trial. Microsoft doesn't use that word, and they never will, but you haven't paid for anything. You can't change the desktop background, and that's about it. How long can you use it for? A long time. So, you certainly can use it if you can use, Parallels Desktop comes with a 2-week trial. You can certainly use Windows for 2 weeks. At the end of that time, if you like it, great. Buy Parallels Desktop, buy Windows. You don't like it, fine, throw them away. You haven't wasted any money, spent some time, but that's all. So I get people that sometimes complain to me about the cost of Parallels Desktop. Guys, you got to buy a Mac. You got to buy Windows. You got to buy Office for Windows. Parallels Desktop is the small number in that list of things. Give me a break.
One of the biggest complaints I hear from PC users is the current version of Windows weekly updates itself. And they tell me that the desktop gets all rearranged and things that worked before don't work today. Is that still true under?
So that comes into my phrase of, I got to get out of So, bottom line, the question is, does Parallels Desktop change the fact that Windows gets updates all the time? And the answer is no. It's a Windows. It's a full copy of Windows. You do have the ability to say, don't even talk to me about updates, except on the weekend from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. And then get updates. So you can control that. That's kind of cool. You don't have that ability in a hardware PC. Windows is constantly getting updates, that's correct. They're also constantly doing previews if you're into that kind of thing. and I have to update my Windows all the time. But that same thing would be true of a hardware PC. Parallels does not change that. It does give you the controls you see under maintenance. You can say, only do Windows updates on Sunday, because I'm not at home on Sunday. You have to leave your PC, you have to leave your Mac on at that time, you have to leave Windows running, but it will update for you at that time, and then you don't have to worry about it. I hope that helps. Desktop rearrangement, that's a Microsoft thing. I don't see my desktop getting rearranged much. Question?
Yeah, can you go back to really old Windows versions?
Ah, good question. So I told you you can only go back so far for Mac OSs in a virtual machine. Snow Leopard server. You're like really nostalgic and you want to run Windows 3.1. You want to run DOS. They will run in Parallels Desktop. The killer is installing them because their installation comes on floppies. How are you going to read a floppy? That's the problem. I know it's solvable, but that's the issue. Absolutely. I have run DOS. I've run multiple copies of DOS. I've run Windows 3.1. I even ran, what was that Windows version with the picture, like a house picture? Bob. I even ran Bob once for chuckles. That was a real experience. So yes, fully compatible. Microsoft doesn't cut off the past like Apple does. You want to run Windows 7 or Mac OS 7? That's really hard nowadays. Microsoft doesn't do that because they can't. They have to have backward compatibility to the beginning of time. I have had plenty of customers talk to me about, we're running this app, it only runs in XP. The programmer who built it for us has died, his children have died, the source code is lost in antiquity, but we use it every day. Our business is dependent on it. No problem. We'll point Parallels Desktop at that Windows XP machine. We'll suck it all into a virtual machine, and there you've got it. You can isolate it from the network. You're safe from viruses. You can run that one app. You're golden. And he goes, great. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, when you said you pointed at the machine and sucked it in,
So,
I mean, your Windows transfer thing works for really old ones too?
it works for a running PC. So, if I go to here and I say, transfer Windows from a PC to this, and you have to go to that hardware PC and install a little piece of software on it so we know which one of the 14 machines you've got running in your home, which one to suck into a virtual machine, and it just sucks it all over. But it's not an installation thing. It's a copying of a running running hardware machine, copies all the data, copies Windows, everything, all your applications into a virtual machine. So that's how you do it. We don't have that feature now for the Mac OS. That's the question I had earlier. Yes?
Since I've been on Mac for a long time, very few things I've ever found. What is one item or, three items that would be worthwhile to have a Windows operating system for?
Oh, that's a good question. So the number one reason people get, this is too strong. A very common reason people get Parallels Desktop is there's a Windows application they have to run. Their job is dependent on it. I get love letters from teachers because they say, I want to use the Mac because I think the Mac is the best thing for my students and myself, but every Tuesday afternoon, I have to connect to the school district server and upload attendance data and grade data, and that requires IE. If I only have one machine, it would have to be a Windows PC because of that one requirement, even though it only takes me an hour each week. Now, because of Parallels Desktop, I can do all that from a Windows virtual machine in Parallels Desktop, and I get to keep my Mac. I love you, like that. So that's a very common reason. We get reports from users about applications they use in Parallels Desktop. We know that people today are using more than 200,000 Windows applications successfully each week in Parallels Desktop. There aren't that many applications available for the Mac, I don't think. So there's lots of applications that aren't available for the Mac, and they want to run those. And we let them do it on their Mac.
I mean, I'm excited about running other operating systems from Mac, but I haven't figured out yet.
You know, the number one reason I want is an application I have to run, only available in my little field, only for Windows, very common scenario. I have a hardware USB device, only has drivers for Windows. Or I'm a student and my professor issues me, class work has to be done in the Windows version of InDesign or the Windows version of Word. I'm a big fan of Office for Mac, but I will admit Office for Windows is the gold standard of productivity software. It is, and you can't get away from that. It does things better, it does more things. Mac is great, but Windows is better, and so I run them both. And if you get a Office 365 subscription from Microsoft for $100 a year, you get 5 installs. My Mac at home, my Mac at work, 1 VM, my iPad, and my phone. $100. That's a good deal.
So you're using those 5
Installs.
licenses on a mixture of different.
Yes, absolutely loud, absolutely loud. All they care is numbers. And they do count those. You go to 6 and one of them will stop.
I'd like to commend your company because right now we're looking at Catalina where they've dropped the support for the 32-bit apps. And Kirk was talking about how his company did this strong investment in using Apple's newest graphics hardware, which was probably a tremendous investment for them. And it seems like extra credit now, but who knows, 4 or 5 years from now, Apple may say no more OpenGL graphics. Everybody has to move over to the new Metal graphics. And I think this is an example of a well-run company where they're adopting Apple's technologies in a very timely manner, which helps ensure that their software will run well in the future too.
The speed improvement we got from moving to Metal was great. But he's right. It was the biggest engineering investment we made this year, was moving to Metal. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I will definitely contribute 2 free copies of Parallels Desktop to the raffle you have coming up soon for Christmas or something, right?
Okay, yeah.
Right, there we go. Okay. Yeah.